Welcome into the first episode of Cigars with Letterman, sponsored by Your Cigar Den and Sky Devil Wines. First guest is a Penn State defensive lineman, former captain, two-time national champion, Bob White. Bob, thanks for coming in, brother.
Thanks
Appreciate
for having
it.
me, man.
How's everything going, man? Absolutely deserve
No
some
complaints, no complaints. I'm good.
Yeah, you enjoyed the season?
I very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was different, very different.
It was. We got a whole new format.
Yes.
Very different from back in the day when you basically just had newspapers decide who was the national champion.
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. And just a different rhythm to the year. You know, we started off with a major concert, right, which was a big deal, and then go into the regular season, and for the first time ever, this playoff hosting, you know, that was different.
Absolutely. Yeah, so let's talk about it, because people that don't know, so what are you up to now, and where are you working at currently?
Well, right now, you know, still there, housed in Beaver Stadium.
There you go.
You know, on the very back end of working all these many years with club seats and suites there in the stadium. So that's been fun, been very interesting. And as you well know, we are, you know, venturing off in a whole different direction right now.
Yeah, complete little overhaul of
Yep.
Beaver Stadium. That's got to be pretty hectic, I'd imagine.
Pretty hectic. Quarter century later, we're on the brink of doing the very thing we did 25 years ago with the last expansion. So it's going to be a major upgrade, major change. Very exciting, right? A lot of new opportunities for fans that are interested.
Yeah, you expand. You know, we don't nothing official. We got opportunities to bring in some other sports, more
Absolutely.
concerts, stuff like that.
Absolutely.
So it would be. Who did we have? What was the concert? Was it Luke Combs?
That was Luke Combs, yeah.
Combs.
And that, really, it was like a regular football day. I mean, in terms of the numbers, number of seats sold, and I think he really enjoyed the turnout. I mean, I want to say it was in excess of 75, 80,000 fans, yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, are you a Luke Combs guy?
I know very little about country music, all right? But it was a regular work day for me.
Yeah, exactly. Another day at the office. It's
Yeah.
not, I'm sure. So, I mean, don't take us through a whole day, but what is kind of like your day-to-day working in Beaver Stadium and working with all these different, I mean, you got a lot of different people you're working with, a lot of moving parts. What does
Right.
kind of a day in the life of Bob White look like?
Well, one of the interesting things about what I've been involved with all these many years is the fact that when I first started all of this, the whole notion of working just with football alone was not a year-round deal. It wasn't as much of a year-round deal. There was off seasons with it, but over time, with this add-on of the premium seating back in 2001 that we kicked it off, the whole football cycle has become a year-round thing. Because when you're dealing with long-term leases, depending on when people are coming on and when they're coming due, with those cycles, the ending of contracts and to interacting with customers about renewing, starting new contracts, it's year-round, man. No sooner you're done, you're starting it up again.
Yeah, it's no off season like
No off-season.
No people think.
It's different.
Yeah. If you had to say how many, so obviously 365 days in a year, how many days are you guys having something going on at Beaver Stadium?
It's pretty constant. That was the other piece that happened after the last expansion back in '01. Shortly after we opened in the inaugural season in 2001, a year later in '02, we started doing stadium events there. And so we've been doing private events in Beaver Stadium after that last expansion since '02 up to present. And in my estimation, it's going to ramp up even more now because now we're adding more space, right?
Right.
And it's one of the prize locations in the center region. And so by the time that west area is done in terms of banquet space, what we've been doing the last 23, 24 years is only going to expand.
So the renovation schedule, I know everybody's pretty interested about this, and I feel like a lot of people don't really know what is this going to look like for next season, because obviously we kind of have to pause them when we get into next season and then officially finish the year after that. Can you just kind of walk us through what that looks like, the schedule?
Well, we have tentatively construction 25 and 26.
Okay.
Ideally, and the preliminary plan right now in 27 to have all the new space ready for use. So it's going to be a 2-year deal. And in the meantime, to work around these next 2 seasons, there'll be some temporary seating, for example, put in this coming season to get us through this 25 season. And after the season's over, then they'll remove some of that temporary seating and continue doing what they're doing with the expansion.
Right, and we just got a new press box. Well, it's not in yet, but we just imploded our press box.
Correct. Correct.
Was that your first time being a part of of an explosion of a stadium?
I would say yes. I can't recall another time when they were actually using explosive over there to get the job done.
Yeah,
So
I
that's
thought
no different.
that's how we had the Nittany Lion mascot press the, go
Yeah.
down on it, and it was I'm sure a good memory for lots of people, and definitely good to update for
Oh,
sure.
yeah.
It might have needed it a little bit, and now no, we're state of the art for sure. You work very closely with Spider Caldwell. That's your right hand man in the stadium.
Yes.
What is everybody knows Spider Caldwell? If you tune into the channel, probably 3 or 4 time guest now.
Right.
What's that like working with Spider every day?
Spider obviously is family, tremendous addition. I brought him back. I was very fortunate to be able to bring him back. I brought Spider back 10 years ago to help me out over at the stadium. From 2001, when we started everything over there, up until 2014, I was kind of running solo. And as things continued to grow and grow with the events and stadium tours and some of the maintenance-related issues and things that were going on over there, it just got to be too much. And under my then supervisor, Mark Warden, 10 years ago, one of the first things he asked me when he came on as the Nittany Lion Club director, he says, "What's your biggest need?" And I told him I needed some additional help. And at that point, we were able to create this position and bring Spider back out of retirement, and it's been a huge help.
No, it's all, yeah. Everybody knows what Spider means to this program. So I'm sure having him around, having someone you can trust, right hand man, that means a lot in there dealing with all of those events. All right, Bob. I want to go back though and talk about when all of your career finished up. Obviously, you landed back here at Penn State. Why is that, in your opinion? What made you want to come back to State College?
Well, it's the whole Penn State thing for me personally was decided as a place that I considered home. Back on the front end, back when I was being recruited out of high school in early 80s, 1982. So when I came here to school, it was not just a temporary stop off in my own mind. When I was out looking at the various colleges that were looking at me at the time, I was looking for a permanent location. I wasn't looking at a place to go for 4 years and then move on. And I had already been away from home for 3 years living in Western PA. So it was a little bit different search for me than it was for most guys who were coming here just for the 4 years and then moving on to somewhere else. So it was an easy thing for me to come back here and settle and do what I did after exploring the professional ranks for a couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, it is one of those things. It's funny now, almost anywhere where players now are recruits and you decide to go somewhere, the mindset, because I had it too, and now I want to live here at State College, but it is, let me get in and get out. I do not want to be there long. But I think when you actually get to be a part of something like Penn State and State College, it can change your mind real fast. And I want to introduce you guys to the newest sponsor behind the wall, Sky Devil Wines. It is owned by a 4th generation Penn Stater, and we are going to make this thing the wine of Penn State. I'm 22 years old. I'm new into wine, cigars, even coffee. I just started, got into the real world, and very quickly realized, but especially I need that wine at the end of the night to really calm me down. So make sure you check out skydevilwines.com, and you can find them on social media all around at Sky Devil Wines. Appreciate you guys. Link in the description below. Go check them out right now. So you mentioned you're originally from Florida and then moved to Western PA. Were you, when you were looking for schools, when you're being recruited, what schools were going after you, and were you looking to maybe go back closer to your original home down in Florida? What was that like?
I considered that aspect of things, which was reflected in the schools that I chose to visit. At the time when I came out in '82, you were allowed to do 6 official visits. So when I whittled it down, the 6 official visits that I took, obviously Penn State was one, Pitt was another, Ohio State was one, Georgia, South Carolina, and Florida State were the others. So I kind of split it between North and South. One of the reasons I went to Georgia, I had some high school childhood buddies that were there at the time. And so I went down for a weekend visit there. But to be honest with you, from the word go, Penn State was at the top of the list and remained there throughout the entire search.
I'm sure a big reason of that was Joe Paterno.
Huge part of it.
What was your recruitment like? Obviously meeting and then getting to deal with Joe Paterno and his crew.
Well, it was a comfort level. The whole college notion or the college idea was kind of new to me. Didn't come from a family of college attendees, and so I didn't really have a firsthand growing up experience around conversations around the dinner table about what college means and what it's about, this sort of thing. So I needed to go someplace where I felt that I was entering into a situation that I could be well taken care of, place where I could be comfortable in terms of chasing the things I was chasing. And dealing with Joe, dealing with his wife Sue, dealing with the coaching staff here, dealing with the university administrators that I dealt with doing my visits, put all the concerns I had at ease. So I was very, very comfortable in my gut with what I was seeing and hearing, had no qualms coming.
I mean, you're mature because you were talking, I mean, back then, I mean, all kids are thinking about is money, getting to the NFL. So you were really thinking about your academics and this is a place I want to call home.
Absolutely.
That's it. Because listen, like I said, especially nowadays, but even back then, I mean, that was not, where'd you get that from? Was that, would you say growing up, like that was, like I said, most people are not that mature at 18 to have those thoughts.
Right. Well, like I said, I had already been away from home for 3 years when I came to Penn State as a freshman. And, you know, when you're running scared, when there's a lot of things that you're not quite certain about, things are new to you, I think you tend to slow down and pay closer attention to what's being said to you, what's being presented to you. And I had to be as certain as I could be that who I was going to turn myself over to was going to be true to their word. And I really, really felt comfortable about everything that was discussed here with Joe and Sue and others that I met prior to coming in.
Right, yeah, absolutely. And then I want to jump ahead real quick. 2 years, in your second year, you guys obviously won the national championship in 1982. I know you were a little bit of a younger guy on that team, but what did you find? I mean, very quickly you found out that Penn State, this is where you come to win national championships. Just getting to be a part of that team as a young guy, what was that like for you? And how did that kind of sculpt the rest of your way at Penn State, seeing that early on and getting to be a part of that as a young cat?
Well, to be honest with you, that was very much part of the discussions that I had on my visits here when I was on campus for these visits, speaking with Todd Blackledge and Kurt Warner and the Greg Gattusos. When I showed up in '82 for my visits and I was dealing with those guys, that's all they were talking about. Hey, we need your help. You're the kind of guy that can help us win this championship. Hey, we're going to win a championship. We're going to get this done. They were all talking along those lines. So it was part of the culture. It was part of the mindset coming in as a freshman. And that mindset collected enough of us coming up from behind that continued in '86 and '87.
Yeah.
Right?
No, it is. I mean, because that's, you know, coming in, I mean, I'll tell you, for me, like, I remember I was a young guy, and we had Jair Brown, P.J. Mustipher, Sean Clifford. And when you have that strong leadership, it means something to a locker room. I mean, you know, when you have those guys that lead by example, and you can look up to them. I mean, and there's a big difference when you do not have that.
That's correct.
And things can go south real quick when you don't have that leadership in the locker room. Because as you know, I mean, the coaches, they can do it. They can do to a certain level, but you got to have those players backing it, or else it really doesn't ring home, especially to those young guys.
That's
and
right.
You got to have the whole team bought in if you really want to do something like win a national championship. That is for sure. So how different would you say? I mean, going back, we're talking the '80s to now. We're in NIL. We are in uncharted territories. But I was going to talk about kind of the old school versus the new school. You know, you guys could barely get a snack without it being a violation, and now guys are getting millions of dollars. Just how different was that lifestyle? Like, how were you guys, you know, treated as players? What were you not and allowed to do, you know, around the facility, that type of stuff? Obviously, you see how it is now. You know, what is kind of that difference from the '80s to the 2020s?
Well, it's still Penn State, right? It's always the name is there, the tradition, the program is there, but I think the volume and the number of distractions have obviously increased. And it's still possible to achieve and do what they're striving to do, but I think it's going to require more effort to remove all those impurities that impede your doing what you want to do. They've always been there. I mean, you know, the frats, the parties, you know, all the distractions that are potentially there are still there, but I think they've increased, obviously. NIL, transfer portals, posting, right? The media piece that wasn't there in the '80s. So there's a lot of other factors that's making it more challenging, but it can still be done provided you're able to get enough guys to come together and say, hey, this is not part of the equation. It exists, but this is not going to help us get done what we got to get done, so we got to move that out of the equation and get back to work.
Yeah, I think a big difference too. We got the transfer portal now, and
Yep.
now it is normal for 10 guys in your class that hey, see you later, love
Right.
you, bro.
Right.
That when you were playing here,
Couldn't imagine it.
How many guys would you say like was that even a real thing?
Wasn't even part of the equation, right? You the reason you were doing your homework when you were being recruited because you in your mind you knew that once I signed, it's a done deal. This is home. This is where I'm going to be. No matter how many times I get chewed out, no matter how many times Joe gets on me, I'll be back tomorrow, right? Because where else am I going to go, right? He holds the scholarship. He holds my meal plan, whatever. This is home. So no, that wasn't even part of the equation. In our day, it was there, but it wasn't something that was utilized on a regular basis.
Right, because you'd have to sit out for a whole year
Correct.
if you were to
Correct.
transfer.
Correct.
And sometimes 2 years in
Right.
certain instances if you wanted to go like in conference. So it is a big difference.
And I couldn't even imagine showing up to practice one day and not having Shane Conlon to the left of me or Mike Russo to the right of me or Gift Topless or Trey Byer behind me because we were committed to each other. It was just a different time.
Yeah.
And again, what these young men are trying to do today, it's doable because it's being done, but they just got more obstacles now they got to navigate.
Yeah. No, I mean, unfortunately, we've lost some of the pureness of college football, but I mean, that's what comes with
Right.
where we're trying to go and, allow players to obviously make some
Yes.
money. And it's, I
Right.
think we're going to start to figure some things out as we move along. But like you said, it is completely different. I mean, now two-a-days are outlawed. You can't
Right.
do two-a-days.
That's right.
You could do some walkthroughs and then a practice.
Yes.
But no, I mean, you guys on bowl trips, you guys used to go down 2 weeks early, right? Can you tell me a little bit about the bowl? It's not how it is now. It's basically a vacation now. But what were the bowl trips like back in the 80s?
Well, yeah, it was the ones that we were able to play in. It was business. I mean, in terms of going down with a focus, with a goal in mind, and striking that balance between having a good time, right? It's kind of a reward end of the year, but at the same time not forgetting why you were there. And Coach always had a really unique way of handling things to remind us of why we were truly there. I mean, he wanted us to have a good time, but at the same time, we're here to play football and win a ball game.
Right. Yeah, I mean that is kind of the hard part about the bowl trips. When you're somewhere for 7 weeks, I mean 7 days, guys get curious. They want to venture out a little bit. You
Yep.
gotta. I mean, you talked about leadership. That's also where you got to have that from the players, from the top down,
Right.
of guys who may be going to do something dumb, and you got some guys that reel it in and say, hey, come on, we're
That's
here
right.
on a business trip. That really is important. And talking about business, let's talk about one of the best teams ever at Penn State, but wasn't able to obviously get it all the way done. The 1985 team, and you guys lost in the national championship game. I think we are in a very similar spot in 2024 to what we were in '85. We were just that close,
Right.
but we couldn't get all the way there.
Yes.
First off, what was that like after the '85 national championship, losing that? What did Coach Paterno have to say? What was kind of like the vibe in the locker room to be just that close, but not being able to get it done?
Well, I mean, I think we surprised a lot of people in '85. I don't know how much of that. Obviously you weren't around, right?
It was barely a twinkle in my
Yeah,
dad's
yeah,
eye,
yeah.
Bob.
But at the start of that year, we opened up that year with the #1 ranked team in the country on cover Sports Illustrated, Maryland. So we go down there in 100+ degree temperature, and weren't supposed to do what we did. We go down and we upset them with the opener in Maryland, and to everybody's surprise, we run the table, find ourselves undefeated, and then we find ourselves down in the Orange Bowl against a very good Oklahoma team, right? Barry Switzer and his boys, Keith Jackson, right? Tony Casillas, Jamel Holloway. I mean, they had a really, really good team. Brian Bosworth, name another one. So there we were down in South Florida in the national championship game that no one expected us to be in. We get into it, and it was an incredible defensive struggle, right? Matter of fact, at half, we had them in negative offensive yards, right? And it was a tug of war back and forth. There was a key moment in that game because our offense sputtered quite a bit that night. Even our special teams sputtered a little bit in that game. But there was a turning point in that game that night that broke it open. And it was a series where our starting safety out of Harrisburg, Ray Isom, goes down with an injury, right? Comes up on run support, injures himself. Timeout's called. They have to pull Isom out of the game. They bring in his backup, Barry Buckman, who was the backup safety. And to Switzer's credit, The very, very next play, they run a play action play off the right side with Jamil Holloway, right? Pulls the ball back. Keith Jackson hesitates on the line of scrimmage, releases, gets behind our safety, Barry Bookman, tosses it over his head, touchdown, breaks it open, right? So we lose this championship game. We find ourselves both on the sideline and in the locker room afterwards, and I mean, it was tough. Guys were really feeling pain on that one.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of crying and hugging and carrying on, and I can remember Joe doing what he always did. He walked in the locker room after that game that night, and he gets our attention, and we're all looking up at him, and everybody's feeling like crap. And he looks at us, these fellas, I'm gonna be gut honest with you. He says, "Tonight we got licked." That was his favorite expression. We got licked. And he says, they were the better team tonight. He says, but I'm gonna tell you, he says, we can make this thing right. And he said, we need to leave here tonight, go back to State College, get back to work, and make up our minds that we can make this thing right. And so we leave, because we're always listening to him. He always had our attention. So we leave, we come back to State College. And I can remember being in my dorm room over in Shunk one day, and shortly after we got back, and the phone rings, right? And it was Cheryl Norman. She was Joe's administrative assistant. And she says, Bob, Cheryl here. I said, yeah, Cheryl, what's going on? She says, Coach needs to see you captains. I'm like, wow, what the heck's this about, right? Not often he calls us in like this, right? So I go down, and we were outside of his office, and I'm talking to the other captains, Shane Conlon and John Schaefer and Steve Smith. I said, guys, what's the deal? What's going on? They said, I don't know. We got the same call you got. And finally, he beckons for us to come in. He says, come on in, fellas, have a seat, have a seat. And we're sitting there like, what's going to happen here, right? He says, I've been doing some thinking. That's exactly how he started the conversation. He says, I've been doing some thinking. And he says, here's what I'm going to do. He says, I've told you guys I think we can get this done. He says, here's what I'm going to ask of you fellas. He says, I don't want any of you out for spring ball this year. Like, what the heck? He said, I don't want you out. I want you to rest up. He says, but I need you to do two things for me. He says, take care of your conditioning. And he says, keep an eye on these young guys and make sure they keep their noses clean and that they're doing what they need to do. And he says, come back in the fall ready to go. He says, we're going to get this thing done, right? Never had happened up to that point. It never happened after that point. So obviously he had processed and think, it's been a long year. These guys need some rest. We're going to get them rested up. We're going to make a run for this thing. And sure enough, everybody comes back in the fall because at this point, you don't want to let him down, right? Mm-hmm. He just threw us a bone, a big bone, no spring ball. So we come back in the fall. Everybody's making their times. Everybody's in shape, ready to go. We kick the year off, and we run the table again. And we find ourselves down in Miami, or in the Fiesta Bowl against Miami, right? And the night of that game, the air was so thick you couldn't cut it with a chainsaw, right? We were in the locker room, and we're getting ourselves ready pregame, and everything's quiet. You can hear little noises with guys getting their pads together and getting dressed for the game. And pretty soon that Brooklyn accent walks in and he gets our attention. He gets up on the locker and he says, fellas, he says, it's been exactly 1 year and a day ago that I told you guys that you can get this done. And he says, I still believe you can get it done. And he says, now go out there and don't let it get away from you, right? And I mean, we were ready to roll, and we got out and we got the job done.
Yeah, you definitely did. And you guys were going against, you guys were clearly the underdogs in that game, right? Going against Jimmy Johnson at the head coach, Michael Irvin, Vinny Testaverde.
Same memo as Oklahoma the year before, right? Very flamboyant, very talented, right?
Yep.
Well coached.
And you guys were battle tested that year, though. You went to Alabama versus they were number 2 at the time.
Right.
Handled them. I think you beat them by double digits.
Yep.
And you obviously played Notre Dame. You had a couple games that year.
Oh, yeah.
How different was that being independent though? Because for me, like I said, I was born in '02, so I don't know anything except Big Ten being in a conference.
It's very different. I mean, everything back then was different. I mean, you didn't have as much TV, a lot of noon and 1 o'clocks, right? I mean, back in the day, if you were on TV once or twice a year, one of those times most likely was a bowl game, major bowl game, right? So when we got the word that we were going to be on national TV, there was a lot of extra polish on the cleats, right? A lot of high-fiving. Right, it was different. So you didn't have night games for the most part. My freshman year, the first night game we had here at Beaver Stadium against Nebraska, right, was portable lighting being brought in because we didn't have permanent lighting. So it was different. It was a very different time than it is today. And no, we were independent for all those years and didn't come into the Big Ten until the 90s.
Yeah. No, it's it's a much different time. Like I said, being a young cat, it's funny to think that, I mean, because you were playing so many different teams every year. I mean, obviously you had a couple that you
Right.
kept rolling back to, but to play, like I said, Alabama and all these teams kind of out of nowhere, did you guys have like a main rival, or was it kind of just
Well,
all over
back in the 80s, Pitt was the big one. We had Pitt, we had Syracuse. Back in the days with BC, Boston College, and Doug Flutie days, that was a big game. You know, Flutie was a draw, and he was a tough character to deal with. But, and you know, West Virginia, right? And going up into Carrier Dome, Syracuse was a big deal.
Yeah.
They had some good teams back in the 80s. And, you know, there was always that one stray one that's thrown in there. Like we had some series back in the 80s with Iowa, back when they had Chuck Long and Ronnie Harmon and Hayden Fry and those guys back in the 80s. So we had those games as well.
Was their stadium that loud back then as it is now?
Oh, yeah.
That was the loudest thing I've ever heard in my life, Bob.
Yeah.
I'll tell you
Oh,
what,
yeah.
it's crazy
Oh,
over
yeah.
there in Iowa.
Yeah.
I do want to go back because I think it is so eerily similar, like I said, where we're at now to where you guys were after the 85
Right.
season.
Right.
I know you kind of talked about what the offseason was like and Joe giving the seniors that spring ball off. But those first couple weeks, those first couple months, when you're getting together with the guys, John Schaefer, that type of thing, which I think is a very similar situation to kind of where Drew Aller's at right now, of, hey, it's time to bounce back. And we got where we sit right now. I mean, some people are slotting us in as the number one, number two team going into next year.
Right.
We're bringing a lot of guys back. Was there some conversation with guys that were maybe thinking of leaving, that you guys that decided to stay because they saw how special that 86 year could possibly be? Or was that those kind of conversations getting floated around?
Well, the core of that group, and I think there's only maybe 10 or 11 of us that have both championship rings. The core of that group was all of those redshirt freshmen, which I was part of, that didn't want it to end that way. We didn't want to leave with it being like this because we knew we had what it took to get it done. And so, thinking about that night down in Miami on that sideline after that Oklahoma game, it just didn't feel right, right? It just didn't feel right. So, the core of that class decided we need to come back and do this. We can get this done.
Yeah, and then obviously, like you said, you go to Arizona the next year, and it is, you know, one of the greatest games ever in Penn State football history. You talked about playing next to and with Shane Conlon. What did he have their number that night? Did he get their call sheet? 2 interceptions, and obviously one of the biggest ones took it back down inside the 5, and ultimately led to the game-winning touchdown. Well, the defense balled out against, like I said, Vinny Testaverde, Michael Irving. It didn't seem like a lot of people were giving you guys a shot. You walk in, obviously you had a chip on your shoulder from the year before, but you guys have a chip on your shoulder, people saying, hey, Miami's going to crush them this year.
Well, we believed in each other. I mean, I think, you know, pound for pound, on paper, I mean, Miami they were talented. Just like Oklahoma, they were very talented. I mean, they had a lot of all-pros on that team. But I think the one factor that a lot of people overlooked or couldn't understand or couldn't see was the cohesiveness of our group. I mean, the guys that I played along with, even to this day, there was a connectiveness there that was a bond that was hard to readily see if you didn't understood it.
Right. So you guys, you get it done a year and a day later. What did Joe Paterno have to say to you guys after that game?
Couldn't be prouder of you. He says, everything I believed about you, he says, you've proven it to me tonight, right? And he just told us how proud he was of us. And it was a great, great feeling to end it that way. It was the right way to end it.
Yeah. All right, so just for all the fans listening, let's just say we got a couple players from this year's team. If you had to give a message, like I said, you literally lived this as a player, and especially not even just as a player, but as a Penn State player, you know exactly what that was like to just be that close and not get all the way there. What would be your message to the guys right now if you're able to talk to them?
Well, I would say that within that unit, team itself, there's got to be that critical mass of players that will not allow themselves not to hold on to everything they have felt this year falling short of their goal. You gotta just let it gnaw at you, right? And as part of that, moving forward in terms of getting focused, putting together the pieces to get it done, they're going to have to be able to remove all the impurities and distractions that are going to keep them off the goal, right?
Yeah.
You got to keep going back to the goal. How you came up short, what do you need to fix, right? And there's going to be a lot of things that's going to challenge that, but you're going to have to push them away.
Yeah, because I mean, we talked about how different it is now.
Yeah.
Now you're hearing it on social media.
Right.
You're hearing all that type of stuff. Because I mean, you guys obviously didn't have anything close to that.
Nope.
Did you have any experiences after the '85 season where it was like anything negative, or did you guys feel like a lot of support overall?
Well, on a different level. I mean, when Joe saw things getting a little frayed on the perimeter with the team in terms of focus, he would call squad meetings, and it was humorous, but it was true. Back in his day, his statement was to us, "You guys got to quit reading your clippings." Right? He would say that to the squad. Got to stop reading your clippings. We got work to do, right? So again, all those things, while they're nice to hear and to see, they're not the things that are going to make the difference with your training in the weight room and watching your diet and getting your rest and making the grade in the classroom and taking care of each other, your players, your teammates, right? It's all those little things and that mindset that you have to establish that's going to make the difference in the pinch.
I mean, you talk about having that mindset, and like you said, that goes top down. It starts with the head coach.
Right.
What would you say is the greatest lesson that you learned from Coach Joe Paterno?
Well, I mean, Joe was real big on commitment and loyalty, right? He was big on focus. I mean, the one word he used, if he used it once, he used it a million times to us over the years, is keep your poise, right? Stay focused. Don't lose sight of what we're all about, what we're after, right? And so again, it's the job of these young people today, and they have a really huge challenge in front of them, is removing the noise. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of distractions out there, and trying to figure out what's real and what isn't real, and what's going to be supportive of the overarching goal and what isn't, and get rid of those things. And it's getting harder because there's so much more of it.
Yeah.
Right? And getting that 105 or 10 guys to all say we're all on the same page.
Yeah.
Right?
And like you said, it's so much harder because now you got all this turnover. Like you said, the guys that you came in with.
Oh yeah,
and you guys had experienced all those hardships. No one was allowed to leave. There was none of that.
Nobody wanted to leave.
Right.
Yeah.
And now, I mean, now that the people getting millions of dollars thrown at them to go elsewhere, and you're bringing in a lot of different pieces, so it is obviously very different.
Yep.
But I think you're right. You have to be able to have that core group that can bring everybody together and do. And as I know, as Coach Paterno says, but you do the little things and do them correctly. It's the big things going to take care of themselves.
It adds up. And you know, to be honest with you, we had back in the day, doing what we were doing, we had the support of the whole community, right? I mean, the State College community, central administration over in Old Main. I mean, everybody was on board. The support staff down in East area, everybody was on board, right? We knew we had what we needed in terms of the support, and everybody was behind us. And you could sense that.
Right.
It takes everybody.
It does. It takes a village, especially like to win a national championship. I mean, only one team does it a year. There's a reason.
You spoke earlier of Spider, right? Between series, when I came off, that son of a gun would find me, right? I was always watered up. My cleats were clean. The nuts on my face mask were tight. I was ready to go, right? So it took everybody to make it happen.
Well, real quick, we talking about Spider as working in stadium ops. What was he like as an equipment manager? And obviously that was early on when he just started working out. What was a young Spider Caldwell like as an EQ manager?
He was very detailed, very much about business, and very organized, very loyal. Right? You can count on him. Matter of fact, to give you a little piece of history here, it was the '82 team that gave him his nickname. That's where that name started, back in '82.
Do you remember that moment he got labeled Spider?
Between tour days. Boredom will do that, between tour days, and horsing around in the locker room, and he was performing for everybody with all these antics with his body and making all these weird contorted moves. And the one lineman that we just lost here recently, very recently, Joe Hines, was the one that said, "Hey, he looks like Spider-Man," right? And it stuck. Ever since then, he's been Spider. But he was crawling around on the floor doing all these weird things for us, and everybody was clapping and laughing. And
those moments in between those 2 days where that's where you find that brotherhood. I mean, talk about it. I mean, it is not, this season is about to start right now.
Right.
The guys got a little bit of time off because it is everything ended so much later, so you got to have a little bit of time. You can't get right into winter workouts right away. But when waking up at 5 a.m. in the winter workouts in Haluba Hall, that is where it starts. When you build and you go through hard things with your brothers and your teammates, that's when you look to your left and your right,
Right.
and in that national championship game, and you say, okay, he's got my back, I got his back, and you know you're ready to ride.
Yep.
And it's not even, there's no question. So it's getting started here shortly for the guys. All right, Bob White, thank you so much for
Appreciate
coming
you,
in,
brother.
man.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate
Thanks
it.
for the invite. For having me.
Absolutely. I'm sure we'll get you on the channel again for sure soon. Great storyteller. We appreciate it. Special thank you again to Your Cigar Den and Sky Devil Wines for sponsoring this video. If any Letterman, Penn State Letterman, if you're watching this, you come into Your Cigar Den, you can get a free Letterman cigar by my man Tony right here. Shout out Tony, the owner of Cigar Den. And appreciate you guys tuning in to the first episode of Letterman's and Cigars. A lot more coming. Got a lot of cool guests coming in, and who knows? Maybe we'll get Spider in here. Spider he could be an honorary Letterman for sure, sure. But appreciate you guys tuning in. Please like, comment, subscribe. Peace.